Hi, this is Bert. At long last, I found myself a member of the Sheridan Animation program that I've been yearning for the past 3 bizarre years. I gained invaluable help from many portfolio sharing videos, and that made me also want to share mine. Before anything, I would like to thank Animation Portfolio Workshop for imparting and systematically solidifying my foundations, without which I might not have made my fervently dreamed Sheridan entry. So, for the year of 2021, the domestic cutoff is at 89 and the international cutoff is at 95. I was fortunate enough to enter with the 97. Here's my score sheet. I worked on my portfolio from November straight to the February deadline, except for live drawing and the personals, which had been ongoing. And here's my portfolio. That concludes the browsing. The format of this video is going to be like this. First, a brief talk on cutoffs. Second, the portfolio review. Third, general insights I've collected during the portfolio making process. And please note that any advice I share is my current still developing opinion. For that reason, if you have corrections or suggestions, you're welcome to share them. To anyone who's considering applying or applying for the first time, Sheridan's animation program is considerably competitive. Many people do not get in straight from high school. Each year, there are people such as myself who's applying for the second, third, or fourth time. Well, just take a moment to let that and its implications sink in. 3 years ago, I was overconfident. I expected luck. Life gave me an array of lessons instead. Let's begin with the cutoffs. While they do look academic average, the threshold is low and doesn't really come into play unless you tied with someone at the cutoff in the waiting list. If you didn't do well in a previous post-secondary education, it is also possible to just use high school scores. There's no writing component nor an interview, so it's mainly a portfolio score that makes the call. In my understanding, the way the cutoffs are decided is that each year, after assessments of all portfolios, limited spots are allocated to applicants higher in the scoring under their own category. The program admits 150 students per year in total, within which 115 is domestic and 35 is international. So the score of 115 domestic applicant and that of the 35th international applicant become the cutoff scores. With that being said, this year's cutoff soared compared to past years because more people are getting higher marks. It is incomparable to the last year, as 5 marks in the storyboard section was moved to the personal art section. The storyboard, with all its complexities, is the renowned mark deduction death trap. Comparatively, personal art is assessed much less harshly. As a result, 5 additional points for everyone with a decent personal section, and for the cutoffs too. Otherwise, it could merely be that the pandemic shut people home and we all had more time to draw, or perfectly skillful applicants from last year who'd rather wait for another year for in-person teaching realized that the pandemic isn't leaving anytime soon, so they re-enter the Colosseum for the win. Right, you can't exactly defer an entry offer. But other than the competition factor, also keep in mind that they do expect you to be decent at drawing already. It's so that they could focus on animation solely for the next 4 years. Getting in isn't just about getting the score, but also being comfortable with drawing a ton yourself. Moving on to the portfolio itself, for newcomers, Sheridan has specific requirements. It changes each year and is given to us applicants as a PDF through the application portal of your category, usually around October to November after you apply. As of 2021, there are 7 sections to a Sheridan Animation Portfolio. They are live drawing, hand drawing, character rotation, short animation, storyboard, layout, and personal work. First, live drawing. It's about swiftly capturing human figures in limited time. For the portfolio, we auto prepare 2 1 to 3 minute short dynamic poses and 2 5 to 20 minute long structural poses. You can choose clothed figures for the portfolio, but upon entering school, we should all be accustomed and comfortable with nudity for the art's sake. For this section, rather than devoting eternity perfecting 4 drawings, we do pass upon pass of drawings and pick the most satisfactory 4 from the pile. It is going to be a continual activity throughout the entire portfolio season. Usually, you will go to your local in-person live drawing sessions, but with the pandemic, photography seems to have become acceptable as well. In fact, I did mine with photos. You could visit online live drawing sites such as Line of Action, Quick Poses, and Senshi Sketch. I had been using Senshi for quick poses, and quick poses, ironically, for longer stationary poses. They all conveniently have embedded timers. Other than that, I did the majority of my live drawings in APW this year. There is a difference between drawing from a flat screen and reality. So if you're like me, practicing figures of the screen, it is advised to supplement it with drawing from live to train your 3D to 2D translation skills. Let's talk about setups. Preferably, we should have a drawing board that can accommodate 18-inch by 24-inch newsprint pads, and of course the pads themselves, which you may need a carton or 2, or at least I did. It's 1 large pose per page. We're only inclined to draw small because we're used to writing symbols where not much details occur, but drawing is different. Working large allows you to excavate the myriad details of the reality of things after you get the whole thing down, encouraging observation in place of our instinctual symbolistic projections. Other than large pads, we're using pencils' wilder counterparts, either graphite or contact sticks, both of which have a larger area of effect. When drawing, it's important that we use the arm movement for the broad, flowy lines and reserve the customary wrist strokes only for occasional minor details. Other than that, we can also get our hands on both regular erasers for sharp erasing and kneadable erasers for soft erasing. As you have seen, here's mine. I would just humbly take this 10 out of 10 despite my imperfect submissions. And here are the other 4 live drawings that my mentor picked but didn't make it. I'm not satisfied with my level. Nonetheless, plenty of learning has taken place. Here's the exciting part, the topic of gesture. When it comes to live drawing, personally I think the most crucial concept is none other than gesture. If you go to class, you'd hear it being phrased as the energy and flow throughout the whole pose. For a long time, whenever I heard this, I always thought a better description could serve learners better. However, after settling down and organizing my thoughts in this video script, I now realize flow is a really fitting analogy for gesture, that is, when it's explained. Well, let me share how I interpret the word flow or energy that is the gesture. Now picture a soft rubber hose with a line along its length. Think of gesture as a gravity-free, self-driven water flow that runs through it. The form of the hose depends entirely on the water flow it contains. If the water flow runs like a C shape, then so does the rubber hose. Take note of the 3D quality and depth of the water flow. It isn't on the 2D glass pane of your device but through the hose itself. If we were to observe it straight on so that it looks like a letter I, we need to remain aware of the C shape and convey that out-in-out curve by pushing the graphite in and out to emulate the depth perception. If the water flow continues to twist the rubber hose, you get a spiraling flow in the 3D space. Notice how the line changes the direction as it goes. While this imaginary rubber hose can be flexible enough to follow the water flow perfectly, hardly is any real subject. Let's imagine a hot straw with multiple bends instead. As the water flow charges through it, it conforms to the straight segments of the straw but bends the straw at hinges. When drawing it, it's easy to see only the jagged curve of the straw containing it and forget the smooth direction of that water flow. So what is the gesture? Gesture is the original direction of the water flow. Our task with the gesture is to stay aware of this invisible water flow and increase its strength to deform the rigid straw in such a way that it matches the original direction of the water flow as much as possible. For a figure, I like to imagine the skeleton as the straw and the joints as the hinges. It's essentially a stick figure. This isn't the same as the often critiqued stick figure way of life drawing, where we are talking about treating limbs and torsos one by one rather than tying them together with one unifying force that's the gesture. Note the difference. Both stick figure and gesture can exist without each other on their own, much like straw and water in separate. But to gesture a person, we imbue gesture into a stick figure like we inject water into a straw. Rather than drawing part by part, we capture the entire movement first, just like how water flows. So, gesture. It sounds like wizardry or martial arts, but it's there simply meant to encourage us to always keep the entire image in sight and to develop drawing as a whole. There are many merits to drawing this way. You get to develop your drawing evenly, keep track of the desirable proportions, and keep the fluidity in visual flows. Then there is volume. We show volumes on paper through cross contours and drawing through our shapes. Cross contour is when you wrap a line over the surface of a three-dimensional form. It's indispensable in showing your understanding of the surface form with line art only. Omitting it, you're leaving it blank for the viewer's imagination. Something that I've been considering recently is that not only cross contours, but also contour themselves are following a cross contour of a volume. So, no final line should be put down without understanding its place on a 3D form. Another aspect to pay attention to is anatomy. I myself, like many others, am still working on it. But essentially, you want to know why the bumps exist and how forms come together. Before diving into the flurry of each individual muscle, I think it is more helpful to learn the basic masses that model the forms and how they interlock. For example, you can imagine the abdomen as a ball and interpret the ribcage and the pelvis as boxy clips that bite onto them. Or think of the entire face as a mask stick onto the cranium. This chain-like structure is everywhere. It is also helpful to learn the landmarks, which are no more than spots that artists find convenient to denote the 3D orientation of forms. It's like installing a simplified 3D wireframe human puppet into your mind. On top of these, I also find it useful to search for and take note of routes that allow one line to travel uninterrupted from the feet to the head, which I think of as hiking paths. For example, you can go from a medial ankle through the shin bone, through the sartorius muscle to the aces, from where you can proceed to the pubic symphysis and follow the midline to the pit of the neck and therefore sternocleidomastoid. They could really come in handy when doing quicker figure drawings. What's more to anatomy, I learned from APW the combo technique of measuring and alignment lines. If you ever see artists holding out a stick and winking, it's likely this technique. Because our eyes aren't developed for mathematical precision, we turn to tools to help us verify and keep the overall proportion. For measuring, the gist is, while looking at the subject, you mark the dimension of one part of your subject on your utensil, compare it to places of similar or convenient relative proportions, and confirm the corresponding set of relation on the page. For alignment lines, you check whether different parts of a drawing situate conveniently on an imaginary straight line, and check that in your drawing. These are especially practical when you have a foreshortened form to capture, where measuring and alignment lines can help you quickly jot down the two-dimensional shape as a basis for further development. Finally, just some additional observations. First, always include the prop. Second, because of the little time we have with live drawing, get used to minimal erasing. Instead, draw lightly and build it up as though drawing the line art on a draft on the same layer. Third, when it comes to the assessment of short and longer poses, the time taken, or the appearance of quick and decisive, slow and comprehensive drawing, apparently is also a factor of consideration. So allow them to easily distinguish between the two types in your portfolio. Let's talk about the second section, hands. Here we're drawing two hands depicting an assigned action. It differs each year, but the criteria are the same. I think it's better to perceive this set as two detailed keyframes of a short animation clip. Namely, in addition to gesture, volume, and anatomy mentioned before, the two drawings should have matching sizes, and when you flip between them, they should convey a convincing movement with a natural arc and force. Among we applicants, hand drawing seems to be treated alongside other drawing for animation, but really, it's alongside live drawing, so it should be done in traditional. This year, we're throwing or setting things down. I chose to throw a key because I think it's easy to draw while it has some story to it. Not that it matters. In my opinion, an exaggerated, forceful action works better, so I tried to show the full motion range of the wrist, back and forward to its fullest extent. Moreover, I tried to demonstrate that I can draw both the palm and the back side, hand open and as a fist. I had a keen focus on the structure, as you can tell by the excessive edges that I tried to define. When I was doing these drawings, more than close observation under bright light, I was also pinching and prodding into my own hand in an attempt to feel the underlaying form. However, I overdid it and it was aberrant from succinctness. More isn't always better. I think what we're doing is we're building a model that represents a hand rather than creating an impression of it. The difference is, an impression relies on our knowledge of it, whereas a model can be understood by someone who's never seen a hand, an alien maybe. The key resides in only drawing edges that indicate plane change. Remember to extend them through the entirety of the form they cover, as opposed to fade the lines halfway through, the conventional treatment. Also the way I did it 3 years ago, and a year ago. Remember to draw through shapes all the time unless it's too busy. I had 2 attempts. Here's my previous one. You can see there's less detail because the paper size is smaller. The action is ambiguous when previewed and could be mistaken for picking something up. The clarity of performance should also be a part of your consideration. The process I used is, I found the object I'd like to use and set up the mirror. I experiment the poses and angles that I want. I establish gesture on both pages, flipping between them to see whether the sizes are consistent and the action goes smoothly. Then, through observing my hand under bright light, pinching and prodding, I solidify the structure of the hand. After that, it's just feedback, change, loop. I owe my drawing angle to a handy foldable vanity mirror. If you're observing your hand, chances are you're drawing the back or profile of the hand. I think an easily adjustable mirror provides more viable options. Consider it maybe. Line weight seems to play a part in this section too. Closer structural lines should be emphasized with heavier, thicker line weight, and farther trivial lines should use lighter, narrow line weight. This way, in addition to perspective, the depth perception is reinforced through lines. Also, from my insightful APW mentor Gerard, I learned that by squinting, which works as a useful natural low-res filter, you can double-check if key structures in your drawings are rightfully prominent. After live drawing and hand drawing comes drawing for animation. It covers character rotation, short animation, storyboard, and layout, all of which challenge not only your technical ability but also your design ability. Therefore, understanding the creative process plays a significant role here because what first comes to mind isn't always the best concept to further develop. The process in my understanding calls for a primitive research, brainstorming, feedback, and shutting doors, iterating feedbacks and improvement. You could put this on repeat until you're content, or until the deadline strikes you down. A technical note, for any drawing for animation, you still always draw through. It helps to show your thorough understanding of the three-dimensional form as opposed to the stereotypical clip art that is flat. Apart from that, I'll just put it down here that I did all my drawing for animation digitally, and I used Clip Studio Paint EX, which is a software with a paid permanent license. If you're considering purchasing a license, it goes on sales often, so I suggest waiting. For the drawing tablet, I was switching back and forth between my antique Bamboo 1 tablet and Intuos Pro 5 that I upgraded to. I'm honestly still not used to the shortcut keys being on the tablet and just find them being in the way. For that reason, I found myself liking the Bamboo better. It's simple and clean. Many people use iPads and screen tablet which are getting cheaper. I haven't used one, so I don't think a screen tablet is necessary if you haven't started digital art. Proceeding on to the character rotation. As I mentioned, as a part of drawing for animation, there are two halves to this section: designing an original character with personality and drawing the character consistently throughout the rotation. The rotation comprises the front view, the three-quarter view, the profile, the three-quarter view from the back, namely a semicircle rotation with the back view deducted because Mr. Sheridan is lenient. It's also line drawing only. We're not using a prompt for this section, so one could start however early as they wish and end up with a total masterpiece. But then again, it usually goes, one grows tired of the character, thinks of something else that's more interesting to submit halfway through, and ends up using that instead, which I totally did. I had a character, which frankly is a caricature of my grandma that I prepared since the summer of previous year, but I eventually reworked in January and submitted my storyboard character, the Lady Beetle, because I think she'll be more potently demonstrating my skills and meanwhile be more unique among the submissions. The deciding factor is, she lives in my storyboard and such a context allows for my better conception of who she is. If you're having a hard time coming up with a character, I guess creating a context is a good place to start. Maybe we on our own can find a message that we want to deliver and generate a character from it. Anyway, I gave the Lady Beetle a stumpy figure, rounded shapes, large eyes, a soft bonnet, a bow knot, and a short cape in an attempt to convey cuteness. As a communicator, I feel that I'm over-relying on the symbols agreed upon in the mainstream. We'll see when I discover a better way to communicate, but this is sufficient for an entry portfolio. Here's my pile of process works. As you can see, she is a cucumber beetle. Starting out, I ditched a pair of limbs, and then she had this uncanny proportion. I had to figure out how her elytra opened. I had lots of trouble fitting the bonnet onto her head because her head is not only flat but also sloping backwards. Anyway, this is the sketch with which I did my rotation. With the design settled, I still did my rotation twice. For the first time, I failed to translate the proper proportions because I decided to start with major volumes rather than gestures. The approach was rectified the second time. Then there's the cleanup and a bit of design change. It turned out decent. I feel good about this character rotation. Moving on to advice. It is my belief that this is your chance to show that you can create a character with an unordinary proportion, since you could have totally reserved the common human proportion for life drawing. With the designing part, personality is what we are looking for here. Like a storyboard should be understood without text, you might want your character's personality to be readable merely by this rotation, through the use of shape language, silhouette, pose, and facial expression. Shape language. If you dial your character down to basic shapes, what are they? Be it rectangles, ovals, triangles, or the combination of shapes, they all convey certain feelings to us on a primitive level. Silhouette. If you backlight your character behind curtains, can an ordinary person still distinguish your character from the others? Pose and facial expression. It is unnecessary to go crazy with it as if you are creating a magnificent sculpture, but make sure you don't leave it at a neutral pose and a blank face. Transition to rotation. Showing that your character has three-dimensional volume is of critical importance. Even if there are many flat stylized characters in this contemporary world, this is no place to do that. This is where you show that you understand. Only by having a firm understanding of the reality can you proceed to thrive in stylization. The process to make a character rotation is usually like this. Draw the front view, transfer the gesture of the pose, the character proportion, and major shapes to the profile view. Insert another page in between and repeat that with the 3/4 view, and finally the same with the back 3/4 view. You can transfer your character by flipping back and forth, aligning using straight lines, or using light tables and alternatives. It's usually done on different pieces of paper and submitted as individual files. If you happen to have done it on the same page, you can crop them up in a graphic editing software of your choice while ensuring they still line up. You can do it traditionally, in which case a light table could save your life, or you can do it digitally like me after I found out how hard it is to make it precise traditionally. Quick tip for digital people. You can borrow the animation workspace. Onion skin and flipping are very handy that way. As a side note, I'd like to talk about the perspective grid in character rotation. Everyone seems to be aware of the disc that their character is standing on, but what happens above the feet? They aren't just level with the horizon line, are they? If you were to be strict about the rotation, parts above the feet should also receive the disc rotation treatment. The degree of circles thereof will be waning and waxing depending on your character's placement within your one-point perspective. Unless you choose to go isometric, which means lines don't converge to a vanishing point but are parallel. This is just something that I contemplated during my process, and I think it might be helpful to know. Next section is short animation. In this section, we demonstrate that we know how to make a basic animation, keep a subject consistent throughout, and create believable motion by making an animation of 24 to 48 drawings. There's no frame rate specification, but usually we animate at 24 frames per second. Note, drawings and frames are different things. Frames as to drawings is like seats as to people. If you have more seats per row, you can have people seated at a more diverse pattern. If you have more frames per second, you can have drawings arranged at a more interesting timing. As long as it's 24 to 48 drawings, you can feel free to animate on 2s, 3s, or have a pause altogether. On the subject of timing, you can reference Niko Pantoja's video. I also suggest checking out existing tutorials on 12 principles of animation. But essentially, these are techniques adorning your animation with believability and liveliness. If I were to paraphrase briefly, you first want to keep your volumes consistent throughout. Then you want to have an idea of your arcs that are action paths your subject follows. After that, you have timing as well as squash and stretch to assist in depicting the speed of the movement. On top of that, you want anticipation that could ease the transition into a motion. Finally, you care about the follow-throughs and secondary action. It is with all these techniques forces combined that we get a natural-looking animation. This year, we're using a given character for our animation, a walkie-talkie, with a curvature to its back. Bending this walkie-talkie had been mind-bending. It comprises a box with an extruded knob to keep track of, an antenna for showing follow-through, and details you could take advantage of. Many people, with me included, decided to make the speaker an eye for the walkie-talkie to increase its expressiveness. Here's my animation. It's actually the section I'm most comfortable with. As you can see, it's the walkie-talkie doing a backflip over a running hurdle and collapsing, all under the scrutiny of a surveillance camera. I animated the flip first, whereas the laboratory setting came to me as I tried to transform the perspective grid into an actual place. I wanted to show that I can twist the form, so I had the walkie-talkie looking over its shoulder to check the course. This loopy anticipation that I sneaked in is something that I'm quite proud of. Other than that, I had a fond memory of acting out the collapsing sequence of my bed to find out that your legs come up when you fall. My process went, I did a rough animation equivalent to planning the keyframes, and I simplified the action a bit. Then I adjusted timing and inserted in-betweens, solidified the knob and the surface details. Finally, I cleaned them up. Honestly, I added the camera just for kicks. Advice! I think adding in a ground plane helps a lot. You always want to ensure your character's footing makes sense in space. What's more, with the upper limit to drawings, I think it's better to keep the action simple, clear, and fluid. In my opinion, cramming too much action into this brief animation should be avoided. An identical action in animation takes much longer than that in a storyboard. Even if the storyboard passes, the pace doesn't always translate into the final animation. Next up we have Storyboard. In this section, we're drawing a 4-panel sequence to tell a story. A theme together with 1 or 2 characters are provided. The storyboard section presents several challenges. To conceive a story concept that clearly reflects the theme, to arrange your character performance and visual composition in order to accurately present that story concept, and to draw other people's characters on model. This year, we have Possum, as it has been for 3 years. The prompt is "Beauty is only skin deep." To unwrap this idiom, I first paraphrased it as "good appearance doesn't guarantee good character." Then, I solidified the phenomenon to a general scenario, namely, Possum has an excellent first impression of something good-looking, but is subsequently proved illusional. Finally, I chose a specific occurrence for my storyboard. Possum thinks the lady beetle is cute and harmless, and allows her to stay. Therefore, his lovely potted plant is destroyed as a consequence. Because Possum made the questionable decision of allowing a bug to stay on a plant based on her beauty, he receives an undesirable outcome and becomes dejected. Therefore, the moral: beauty is only skin deep. Fun fact, I remember thinking that so many people are playing slapstick on Possum and I don't feel particularly inclined to commit physical violence, so I planned an emotional shock for Possum instead. Although it is fully valid to walk familiar routes and do them well. I spent the most time on storyboard out of all because it is a precarious section. I lost 2 marks. It perhaps ties closely to my presentation of this less familiar story. I sent my work in progress storyboard without text to my parents and friends for feedback, and many of them, when reading one by one in sequence, found the ambiguity in the second panel. It only works in the full context, and a good storyboard shouldn't require backtracking investigation from viewers. As for my process, it is indeed quite a mess because I was working traditionally at first, and yet did I have an established way to make the process clean. I drew too heavily and the lines wouldn't erase, I didn't have the patience to trace over, I was using paper notes to patch existing drawings, and having lots of them is just haphazard. Notwithstanding, I pieced together my schedule of process works, and here they are. I started with idea brainstorming. Then I had a long period of thumbnail trials, experimenting with different setups of environments, character poses, and expressions. It's a process of seeking and responding to feedback. In retrospect, I wish I had started working larger earlier. While thumbnails allow for a close monitor of the entire panel, they grow messy very quickly with little room to make revisions. After the basic composition is established, there should be a point of conscious decision to transition into working larger to better develop the details as opposed to fretfully struggling with the thumbnails. This is a section that teaches you how to be humble. While we are writing scripts under each panel, clear visual storytelling is the test subject. Can you understand without the text is the spotlight question. Oftentimes, we take our interpretations of our stories for granted, unaware of our preconception. It is the curse of knowledge, not knowing how it was like to not know something. Story panels have their own mind. A picture left unchecked can often be interpreted in multiple ways. To combat this, we draft the story and ask loads of people their interpretations. Thereby, we double-check whether our intentions are well delivered. In turn, we make adjustments where we see fit. I believe I received this advice from Palumin's video, by the way. I think I really benefit from it. As for technical advice, I think this is a good place to bring back gesture, or one particular definition of this broad umbrella term: visual paths. Explanation: a 3D object exists on a plane as an illusion through 2D lines. It is possible to take the arrangement of these flat lines to our advantage because our eye's aptitude at following lines. It's basically manga concentration lines, or road sign arrows made subtle. While making this video's background, I think I found something interesting about this topic. There are some grammar rules, a set list of operations you can do to direct the line. I think there are 5 ways to add a line onto a given curve. You can extend, draw parallel, expand or pinch, overlap, and change direction. This is also new to me, just something to think about. But yes, by intentionally plotting how viewers' eyes travel through the picture, we enhance the fluidity of the experience and ensure the proper function of the intended focal point. This should be most considered in the storyboard and perspective section. Another thing is, use the specific shot types listed in the rubric. The variety of shots in this context refers to the conscious choice over how much of the subject is shown in the frame. A close-up shows only part of a character. A medium shot crops up to the waist. A full shot snugs the entire subject in the frame. A long shot portrays the character and the full surroundings. You can learn more about this in the subject of cinematography. Then there's the 180 rule, where we are advised to compose shots in such a way that 2 characters always remain on the same side of the frame throughout a sequence. That is unless the character moves across the screen during a clip, which is never in our storyboard project. So, same characters, same size for all 4 panels. This is to conform to our viewing habits so that we instantly understand who's whom all the time. It doesn't mean that the characters literally couldn't switch sides in their environments, since that would be playing unnatural. As cinematographers, we can accomplish the 180 rule in this case by switching the camera angle. Additionally, if the story is taking place in the same space, you also need to watch out for the scene consistency. When the camera angle switches, check if the room remains the same. Aside from shots, we're also actors, so pay some attention to the poses and expressions. Run your pose through the silhouette check. Can it be read without ambiguity if it is filled in? This reminds me of a video on the effectiveness of Ace Attorney's limited animation. I think it shows a very good example of this concept. Lastly, to clarify the ambiguity, shading in this section is optional. Lots of past applicants have used 2 to 3 grayscale hues to group the foregrounds and backgrounds. It makes panels cleaner and more readable. You can choose to do it like an overall value composition where it is a distilled version of lighting, or choose to only shade in the active elements like mine. Ever so often there are people using shades as if they are coloring in black and white. In my opinion, it is making your task more difficult. If done not carefully, light and dark patches might divert from the focal point you tried so hard to create in the line art. That being said, nothing about shading is mentioned in this year's rubric. I think people are doing it because other people are doing it. Layout. Here, we're doing 2 widescreen perspective drawings, 1 linear and 1 landscape. In a simplified sense, it is 1 interior room and 1 exterior natural environment. We ought to include at least 1 character in each drawing. In addition to the elephant in the room that is the perspectives, 2 aspects are worthy of attention in this section. For one, a scene is meant to tell a story. The story should channel through both character and environment. What will the character be doing in the scene? Can the environment also spell out traces of what's happening? For 2, the gesture should assist your storytelling. Lines intrinsically have directions. They usher viewers through your drawing, so use lines to lead viewers towards your visual focus. Be aware of putting a long, uninterrupted vertical line in the center, as it can block eyes from traveling onwards. In that case, strategically deployed items can serve to break the barrier. Anyway, just keep in mind all lines have a mission and are at your command. Moving on to my interior layout, I chose to fabricate a GO train station booth. Primarily, I thought public spaces have been rare in past portfolios, and the unique theme is always a plus. Then, since the setups of a public venue are predetermined, It saved my indecisiveness about furnishings. With gathered photo references, I could readily plug some to frame the composition as if I was picking furniture in IKEA. Moreover, I'm a commuter. I am familiar with more than a couple of stations. Personal experiences assist in gluing diverse references together into one coherent image. There isn't too much process work for this section. I picked this one from a dozen of thumbnails. It started with a passenger on a bench waiting for a train, taken from my own solitary experiences. A sketch of a mop bucket I did in Oakville Station entered my head, so I blended them somewhat and introduced the janitor character. Then there are two character designs. To relate the two characters to each other, I created this conflict of a coffee spill. Finally, on the basis of small thumbnail sketches, I developed it stage by stage into the finished product. When it comes to draftsmanship, the indoor layout is demanding on perspective. If you are working digitally, the perspective assistant isn't infallible. It only saves the hassle of incessantly tracing back to the set vanishing points. It is essential to study how to measure equal distance, as well as to scale, rotate, and manipulate objects. With those operations under your tool belt, even sheer boxy setups can be made interesting and lively. On the expansive topic of perspective itself, I recommend Scott Robertson's How to Sketch from Imagination. In the book, he progressively goes over all the topics regarding perspective. I learned a ton just by following along the tutorials, and I wish I had done that before my first application. Now I'm a big fan of perspectives and structures. Alternatively, if you want to cut down expenditure, check out Modern Day James' YouTube channel. It is also very informative. Customarily, we use two-point perspective for indoor layout, which has shapes on two axes distorted towards respective vanishing points. Although, when we're categorizing pictures into 1-point, 2-point, 3-point perspectives, we're mainly referring to the perspective of the entire scene. For all the items scattered across the room, realistically, they will have vanishing points all over the place. Miscellaneous perspective tips. To rotate an object, you glide the two vanishing points simultaneously along the horizon line. About circles in perspective. Circles generally appear oval in perspective. The shortest axis through the oval is called the minor axis. The minor axis is always perpendicular to the plane where the circle is situated. Therefore, to estimate the circle in perspective, you can find the minor axis which always cuts the circle symmetrically. A basic thing to hunt after is a tangent. A tangent is when an object just so happens to script that of another. When a tangent occurs, it becomes hard to tell what's in the front and what's to the back. To resolve the issue, simply bring one to overlap another or pull them apart. It's brought up in this section, but it's generally applicable. I also sneaked an advanced piece of advice from Zootopia Artbook. That is, you can imagine the objects as people to better envision gesture flows. I didn't do it here, but I was applying it on my convenience store drawing. In this drawing, numerous goods have to be haphazardly placed on the shelves. Look, ones on the shelves are like an audience observing the merchant, ones on the counter are as if in a queue, the rice bags behind it look as if considering whether they should join the line. It is a great technique to create an organized mess. For the exterior layout, I did a rocky desert, because everyone seems so fond of forests. I was going to draw a bare forest devastated by volcanic activity, which would have been way more fantastic, but I also wanted to include the merchant. Overlooking the fact that I can flout common sense or avoid a human character altogether, I decided to make the environment more bearable to him. Like so. The environment was tuned down to an arid plain. I appointed him to be a water merchant in the scorching heat, until lack of reference told me otherwise. Although, during research, I ran into a video of a sugarcane juice stand. To couple that with my personal experiences, I handed him the new role as a sugarcane juice seller. It is fair to say the Traveler is merely an accessory added as an afterthought to keep the merging accompanied. I briefly researched and gave the Traveler a knotted schmog for a hint of desert influence. And that's how this desert merchant and traveler story came into being. This perspective drawing was what I did last, so there's little process work. Some people regard the exterior layout as the easier of the two because the perspective isn't as strict. Yet, personally, I had way more trouble precisely for it. In part because I do want to follow the perspective strictly. To accurately account for the winding road and distance, I hand-built the infinity grid. But then, what do you do with the volumes of organic shapes? I know, toony is an option, but for us who want the volume, without those hard edges suggesting forms of conventional 3D illusion, the foliage of the trees and bushes all look so flat. Furthermore, personally, I had little experience with nature. Shaping and texturing tree trunks, rocks, and dirt in an organic way is just another added challenge on top of the volume quest. How did I tackle these? A week before due, I met with my tutor Josh, who also had been my first APW instructor. He suggested that I employ looser lines and add surface details to serve as integrated cross contours. He also recommended Etherington Brothers' miscellaneous item tutorials to me. Back to it, in hindsight, cross contour has been volume's friend in mechanical forms. It makes sense cross contour could also be your universal ambassador to the volume country. With organic forms, it's just further flavored with dents and bumps, which describes the texture of the subject. You could strategically sprinkle cross contours through foliage and ground. The density of it helps suggest volume. About texturing. At first, I didn't comprehend the suggestion of using looser lines. But as I continued to work on it, it struck me. Throughout years of effort to draw controlled, fluid lines like a circling bomber dropping explosives, I have inadvertently dismissed the potential hidden in jittery lines. If, before putting down a stroke, you skip the air drawing drill and let go of the wrist, lines gain a less artificial look. What this provides is not only a better line choice for natural elements, but also a scale of looseness and tightness, a new contrast pair at your disposal. Another advice Josh gave me is to sprinkle reappearing objects throughout the depth. Seeing trees and bushes of similar sizes at different dimensions apparently help our eyes understand the depth to the image better. Thank you, Josh. Finally, for your information, the rubric says shading is allowed and optional. Shading is a nice way to keep the complex line art organized in addition to the usage of line weight. I kind of regret not doing it because I found my exterior layout loses definition at thumbnail size. Personal work. Welcome to the section of free play, where you flaunt what you've got within the given limit of 5 to 7 pieces. For my personal section, I submitted 6. For the first piece, it's a PDF collection of sketches. It includes astronaut doodles from Gravity, a sequence of Doberman dog construction using YouTube videos, few sketches I did during pre-COVID commutes and the dining, an opera singer character, and 2 views of a tailor's room following Seneca application prompt, an imaginary workplace cafeteria where some Raj's lunchbox exploded in the microwave, and a compilation of Proco anatomy course exercises I did over last summer. Avoid dense compilation like this, by the way. It screams, I studied, but it rejects examiners from scrutiny. Anyhow, as you can see, you can bunch sketchbook pages into one PDF. For my second piece, it's a combination of colored creature drawings. I ran out of time, so these are expedients. The left one is actually my friend Carbon T's OC, and the right one is the orange lizard from the game RimWorld. Right, I incorporated a load of fan art into my personals. You aren't supposed to do that because they want to see originality. I more so intend to show my interest in drawing creatures and my ability to color. And yes, you can put related pieces onto one canvas and call it one as well. For my third piece, I have a character painting of a stumpy Doberman astronaut and a gangling European badger novice. I had a much grander vision for this duo as I wanted to set them into the quest airlock and the botany chamber of the space station. I even planned some interactions between them, but the deadline happened, so that was cut short. Start early, my fellow hopefuls. As you can see, this is also complete with process. I started their design with shapes, then I wanted to reflect their personality through poses and expressions. Lastly, I wanted to show that I can do paint over render. Process works like these allow examiners to see how you developed your artwork. For the fourth, it's a layout of the Grandpa store. It is a convenience store I spent my childhood in, but had since closed in 2011. It is colored a monochromatic value because by the time I got to coloring, it was literally 8 AM February 21st, the due day. I reconstructed the store from a shaky, blurry, noisy 480p video I took at the time. It is also my only reference other than my vague memory. It wasn't enough though. I had to search up various outdated product references because how blurry it is. Anyway, this is a 3-point perspective piece as you can tell from the slightly converging vertical lines. I think it is a good supplement to the 2.1 in the portfolio proper. I strive to fit the entire scope of the shop by using the aerial angle. I wanted to recreate the sense of mundane messiness without losing the gesture flow. I also want to show that I can handle more complex layouts. I am proud of the line art of this drawing. For the fifth, it's a demo reel of 3 short clips of animation I have made. I had my friend Carbon T's character Owly doing funky moves as an opening because I think the action fits as a friendly greeting. It is followed by my friend Cotton's OC running because I wanted to include something that loops. This also resembles a loading sequence. The grand conclusion is a 16-second clip I did for a Ringworld map as a fan tribute. This clip is my first attempt at longer narrative animation since I procured a deeper understanding of perspective and gesture, so it was somewhat meaningful. This is half finished because time ran out. It's later completed though. I wanted to show that I can animate characters in scenes, as well as matching animation to music beats. With fan art, it's concerning and precarious, I know. I was on my toes, but thankfully it went smoothly. Anyhow, you can add several animations into one demo reel, and it is one piece. For my sixth piece, it's a collage of 3 colored Ringworld environmental illustrations. More fan art! I will humbly take some credits this time though, as I had to reimagine lots and lots of details on top of the original ingenious atmospheric renderings. If you're interested, this is the communication arrays, this is the shoreline and Leviathan, and this is the creepy and awesome underhand. I've been inspired by these majestic sceneries and structures in Ringworld to throw characters into environments. By this painting collage, I want to show the passion. That concludes the detailed tour. As you've seen, in spite of the 5 to 7 pieces boundary, with permissions to group a few into one, the upper bound is in fact very malleable. Knowing all the applicants are doing that, isn't it just tempting to stack piles onto one? I had wondered how many actually to submit. I think it goes back to the premise of the section, personality. Quantity is less concerned than what you manage to demonstrate with your submission. Does your submission show the content you're interested in creating, the media you can employ, your process, and the level of completion you usually strive for? Rather than chewing over what to include, try to think as if you were writing a self-introduction using a selection of artworks. Show your interest and capabilities. That being said, if you are only accustomed to a limited type of work and medium and still have rather abundant time, I highly recommend exploring a bit, as per our invaluable and sacred guide, the rubric. Back to the discussion on quantity. I think one piece of well-built artwork could well demonstrate more skill than a collection. For example, instead of having a character sketch, a layout, and a colored object drawing, fit the character and the object into the layout and color it. This way, you show not only what you would have shown through separate pieces, but also in a holistic manner your ability to combine and layer. General portfolio advice. So far I've talked about many concepts under each section, but really, lots of concepts are commonly valid, so no need to refrain yourself. You know, always pay attention to gesture flows, drawing solid and drawing through volumes. Always avoid tangents. Always use the squinting technique to check if the right thing is rightfully prominent. Always feel free to consult reference materials. Always shoot and crop good pictures if you are doing traditional. Always peruse the rubrics and the criteria for exact specification. There is a specific file naming scheme and the format that they want. Portfolio season advice. After reviewing the entirety of the portfolio, which by the way only took me 2 months to write and 3 months to postpone recording, I would also like to put together a reflection of what I think I did right during the portfolio making process, both for your reference and for my journey ahead. First, mindset and determination. This will be a long one. Take Sheridan Animation's objective competitiveness to heart. Many, including me, in their first attempt think they could try and maybe get in. I think even firmly believing and committing the effort only puts you in the group who have the opportunity to get in. This is especially true if you are international due to the limited spots. It is important to recognize that lukewarm investment pales when even full efforts buys mere possibility. But instead of saying this is not enough, let's say we can do even better. We need extraordinary resolution. To put that into practice, during this portfolio season, I had been stressing to myself, I will get in, it's my last chance, and I'm willing and determined to do anything for it. This is it, and I'm going all out. Although I will counterbalance that with a paraphrased word of wisdom from my APW mentor Gerard, as hard as you can give your try, you cannot control the circumstances. In Sheridan Application's case, it means we can put up our best effort with portfolio, but we cannot, in the real sense, affect admission decisions because it's up to the examiners. There are things you can and cannot control. Thus, I think that determination is better channeled towards I'm willing and determined to do anything to produce the portfolio with which I will be content and have zero regrets by the time of submission. The word anything is an empowering one. It ignites the yes to say no to all other distractions. There's another level of determination that has slowly dawned on me, being determined about living a life of high spirits and inner peace. We are accustomed to react to conditions in certain ways, depression to failures and exhilaration for successes, but things are in constant flux, and it's essentially conceding your controls of your emotions to chance. Life is in fact a subjective experience. Rather than pin it on how well conditions objectively are, try to pin it on how well your perception and attitude are dealing with varying circumstances. This way, even in a bad situation, if you cope with high spirits, you are living a great life. For example, yes, maybe I have wasted some valuable afternoons and evenings that could have been used for making this video happen, but as long as I am doing it now, I am living a good life and I am proud of myself. About inner peace. When your present state rather than the external conditions is the criterion, you quickly realize your inner critic and doer are not in a leader-follower relationship. The two voices inside yourself are intimate teammates who are better off being mutually forgiving and supportive. Nobody other than yourself should be taking the most care of your personal well-being. Rather than saying to myself, I can't believe you did this again. It's better to say, yes, that happened, but we together can do this. This fosters consistent high spirits. But back to the topic of determination, it means being determined is not only about the immediate goal, but about living the life of inner peace and high spirits. Next time something didn't go as well as you wished or a challenging life circumstance arises, remember to put current morale over conditions, to reconcile your inner critic and doer by emphasizing their shared prospect of a better future for you. You are willing and determined to do anything that you have set your mind to. This is the key. It's less about getting into Sheridan and more about working to your present heart's content in the effort, knowing that you're doing your best with the given conditions. 2. Immersive surrounding. Committing can be challenging. Since you've decided on a path, I recommend filling your mind with the goal. Otherwise, something else irrelevant will instead take it. It's like taking care of a plant. Keep it inside and naturally you will remember to water and weed it. You could disperse hints that refresh your Sheridan dream. Join the Sheridan Animation Hopeful Discord server and see people work. Use the social aspect to strengthen your connection to your task. Consider putting up works of others and your own on your wall to embody the quest in everyday life. Regularly ingest past portfolio review posts and videos to remind yourself of the difficulty and the effort you will need to put in. Hey, a dose a day, motivation at bay. Maybe even visit some Sheridan Animation student blogs, watch some student live vlogs, student films, industrial day videos. Keep your mind on the goal. What's on your mind decides where your effort goes. I mentioned these because I did them all. These are for reference and you're welcome to suggest more. 3. Seek help. With the help of others, it's possible to reach higher than what you can accomplish on your own. Ask questions, post your work in progress pieces in the Hopeful Discord and seek feedback. Instead of groping your way alone, try joining a guided class. Find a student in the program or a tutor for suggestions. Turn to your professors if you are in art fundamentals. Go to Sheridan's Portfolio Review Day and consider APW's Portfolio Review Day too. It's amazing how much actively reaching out for support can help you along the way. It's not the time to be shy. If you are determined, grasp all the help you can get. 4. An open mind. Is this good enough? I don't think it's uncommon for someone seeking admission to a dream school just like the younger me in 2018 to ask this. We all want to be acknowledged for our potential to proceed in this desirable path. But this question does little good when asking for feedback. It is a yes or no question, and it comes not from the desire to improve, but whether the status quo is sufficient. In my case, coming out of the secondary school, I had wishful confidence and was purely seeking for affirmation because of the discourse around the daunting competitiveness of the program. This, in retrospect, is a mix of fear and blatant arrogance, a solicitation for approval disguised as that for suggestions. A portfolio review is meant to receive feedback, which is but a means to an end. It is in one's self-interest to first take note of the difficulties they've been having and bring up those questions. I would also add, may I ask what are some aspects that I overlooked? Or, like some hopeful Discord applicants more passionately phrase it, could you tear this apart? More authentic feedbacks from pros, less errors left for examiners. Plus, in the end, we're drawing for ourselves. We're getting the education for ourselves. Seeking betterment is for our own sake. 5. Between conforming and refusal, you can have your own take. This is a major life lesson for me. I'd like to cover it with my experience. I didn't get into Sheridan Animation out of high school and was in a graphic design program for 2 years. Even though it is also a visual subject, I gradually became aware that I didn't like it as much as I had first thought. I attributed the cause to the sharp, inorganic edges of the shapes, the tacts with which I work. They felt like constant paper cuts on dry skin on a windy wintry day. The layout of text and images, so mechanically bound in boxes, it felt like rigidness and soreness in your neck, but instead in your mind. So, despite pushing myself hard at the subject, because I don't like that look, I was slowly refusing it inside. It showed in my performance, and to cut short, that didn't end well. A lot happened after that. When I was in APW, I did exercises aimed to develop awareness of different aspects worthy of attention in a drawing. I came to connect them more or less to the previous trainings in graphic design, and found them were different manifestations of similar principles. On top of that, I was seeing a connection between abstract art and representational art. I am spotting more and more graphic design embedded in various works that are truly inspiring. For example, the cinematography of films and games. I also realized one of the Ringworld's creators studied the graphic design. All of this led me to rethink my old attitude towards graphic design. Then it struck me that what I really didn't like back then had been their particular look and style. I had inadvertently put a mistaken equal sign between that and the graphic design itself. Graphic design with all its considerations and neutral tools, and they can be at my disposal in the way I like and add to my capability. Taking a step back, I found many things could be dealt with this way. Don't like how a subject is taught? What would you like to know about this field and how would you like to learn? Don't like the existing solution to a problem? How would you solve it? Receiving specific suggestions that subverts your intention? Identify what consideration hides under the suggestion. The idea is, if you don't like something, maybe it's only some certain aspects of it you don't like. If you put that aside, there's a middle route between refusal and conforming. It's accepting something in terms of your own take. 6. Time management. Haha. Time for the infamous advice. Start early. So general of a saying, but still undeniably valid. Live drawing takes time to get good at. Drawing for animation takes time to iterate between improvement and feedback. Everything takes longer than you think. I started in the summer and by the last week I was still missing a content collection of my personal works. On the last day I was still lining my layouts. This is outrageous. So definitely set deadlines for yourself. By default, it seems preferable to assign each section to a stretch of time and all sections throughout the portfolio season. But I find that it may be more effective to try finishing all sections in a stretch of time and do iterations of all sections through the portfolio season. There are many benefits to this approach. For one, you don't leave anything behind and this reduces your anxiety. For two, because there's intermission between development of the same section, you get to see your work with more refreshed, objective eyes. For 3, trying to finish your portfolio in 2 weeks when you still have the abundant time allows you to experience just how time flies without you being the actual risk of missing the deadline. For 4, it's actually quite impossible to complete the section and move on. After completion of a section, you could always find more changes to make, either because you spot more errors or your skills improved over time. So this is actually the one realistic plan to go with. Another thing is about equal time distribution between drafting and producing the final. When I was making the portfolio, I was rapidly iterating less complete thumbnails and doing modifications using sticky notes. I was acutely aware of how that helps me quickly test out ideas. But in retrospect, I think I might have spent too much time drafting. Producing a final is a completely different experience than drafting. You learn from doing clear lines and solidifying structures, and your first final is likely not your desirable final. So, get to final early for your final. Finally, the most effective thing I've done this portfolio season with time, in my regard, has been setting up a physical countdown timer. I caught the inspiration from Unis Honest. It's a deleted channel co-hosted by Mark and Ethan where for 1 year only, they do activities that explore what life has to offer when it comes to feeling alive. It reminded me the transient nature of life, so I took from that and set up the countdown. I used the physical timer because the presence in the real world is so much stronger than that hides in the background of a phone. Seeing days dropping and seconds ticking for me really worked in whipping my pacing. 7. Take care. If you're going to be an artist, take care of your arms, wrists, hands, back, and neck. It's no joke, you literally will be working off them. Do warms up before drawing. Shake your hands and stretch when you are tired. When I finished my portfolio, my right hand was clicking and I went to physio. It's better now, but it still clicks. If you encountered problems, go see a doctor. Better early and mild than late and worsened. Eat well, exercise, and sleep. Your body in essence is a food processor. Your fuel and maintenance play important parts in your energy state, therefore performance. Okay, that is about everything I'd like to share at this time. I'm speaking from the end of my recording session. Thank you for listening this far. It must have taken some patience because holy smoke did I not think it would make it into the 1 hour room. This is my first time recording something and making a video. It's pretty exciting to finally get over it. Anyway, I hope it helped slightly. I would like to say a sincere thank you to those who helped and supported me. Thank you. And good luck to me and good luck to you. Cheers!